For our next guest, we have Ken Leslie. Ken is an artist and educator living in Rockhampton with his beautiful wife and his two amazing children who are all here today. He's a keen believer that the arts are an essential part of life, and that looking at and talking about art will not only make you a smarter person, but also a better person. He's yet to be proven wrong about this. Ken believes that everyone has the tools required to engage with contemporary art in a sophisticated way. Following his simple guidelines, anyone can make intelligent and insightful responses to even the most confusing and bizarre artworks, no matter how little you know about art. With art, there are no trick questions. Please make Ken welcome.
All right, before I start, I'd just like to let you know that I've got a couple of slides towards the end of the presentation of some artworks that we're going to talk about, and it's kind of important that you're able to see them. So if you can't see the screen, or most of the screen, it's probably going to be wise to shuffle around a little bit so you can see it. Okay. We've moved. Sorry about that. We'll deal with that. Okay, so as you can see, hi, my name is Ken Leslie, and just like I was introduced, I'm a visual artist, I'm a local primary school teacher, and I'm also an arts blogger. The little cards on your desk, on your tables, a little link to my blog. I like to think of myself really as a combination of all three of those things, and I actually like to think of myself as more of an arts educator. I have a real passion about teaching people about the arts, because I do think that the arts are vital for living a good life. I see my own art practice as having two real sides to it. I've got my art making side, so paintings and sculptures and things, and there's also the critical and the education side. That's like my blog, and that's also what I'm here for today. Today I'll be talking about how to overcome some of the difficulties many people have when looking at contemporary art. I'm going to start with a big question, and the question is, who is the audience for contemporary art? You know, who is contemporary art made for? And my answer to that question is everyone. And my evidence for this is that galleries are generally free to visit. You don't need a secret password or a key to get in. It's not like a secret society. And if you're one of the people who are out there that might actually visit an art gallery now and again, you should feel like you belong there, and the things that you have to say about the artworks are worthwhile and valid. The big problem is that many people don't feel like they have the right to comment on art, especially if it's an occasional visit or if you've been dragged to an art gallery by a well-meaning relative. I believe that there are many hidden barriers to people, that's stopping people enjoying art and what art can do for them. I think the biggest of these barriers is that art is generally pretty confusing. I think we can all agree that a lot of art is quite hard to get a handle on. And there's been lots of art throughout history that has been really, really difficult to understand, and there's a wide variety of reasons for that. Sometimes it's full of symbols, hidden meanings. Some of it's really confronting. You don't really want to look at it. Some of it just seems empty. Some of it's just plain old weird. Without a decent art education, this can leave you feeling like you're the only person in the room that doesn't get the joke, or make you feel like you're the uncultured swine who's rocked up at an art gallery. We have professional critics, curators, directors, the list goes on, who are very adept at being astute commentators on art. And a lot of people think that if you're not one of them, you don't actually have the right to talk about art at all. I actually think that that's very, very wrong. I'm not going to lie to you, having a really good grounding in art history is going to help a lot. But that doesn't exclude you from experiencing art, and it certainly doesn't mean that your opinion isn't worthwhile. I liken the feeling of not understanding art to a feeling of illiteracy. You can see that there's something going on, it's just that you can't work out exactly what it is. My belief, though, is that everyone actually does have the tools and knowledge to interact with art and to make really good comments on art. But we don't know how to use those tools and how to begin to approach art. Luckily, I've come up with a few guidelines to help anybody make the first step into making expert comments on art. Because of the way I am, I like to make hard and fast rules on stuff, and I've boiled this process down to 2 broad concepts to keep in mind when you're looking at art. These guidelines, you only need to remember 2 things when you're going into an art gallery. The first one is, yes, it is art. Okay. The second one is, you need to ask questions to get answers. I know this sounds a little bit ridiculous. Surely this can't be everything I need to remember when I'm going to an art gallery, but it is. Both of these points carry some pretty hefty concepts. So I'm actually going to unpack both of them, and then I'm going to put them into practice and show you how it works. Before we do though, I'd like to remind you that this is only one way of developing a statement or a response about an artwork. There's many, many, many different ways of doing it. This is just the one that I've come up with, and it's easy to remember, and it can teach you a lot about art, can teach you a lot about yourself, and it's particularly easy when you follow these guidelines. Okay, so the first one, yes, it is art. It really doesn't sound like much. This doesn't sound like something that's very difficult to do, but it is. And it's actually a huge realisation for lots and lots of people. Saying to yourself that, yes, this is actually a piece of art, means that you have to drop all of the negative concepts that you have about what you perceive, about what constitutes good art. So all the things that you need to imagine, what makes a good piece of art, you need to ditch those and just accept that what I'm looking at is actually art. It's all about not being sidetracked by thinking, bloody hell, I could do that in about 12 minutes. Or my kid could do that. Or how much did this thing cost? We need to eliminate those thoughts from our mind, and we need to accept that yes, this is in fact art. The acceptance of art being worth looking at is usually the first casualty of contemporary art. There's 3 big reasons for this, and we kind of need to touch on each to really understand why we need to forget it. The first reason that people don't believe things as art is history. Art has a really long history, and the icons that we hold up as being the ultimate masters of art, that's Picasso, Van Gogh, and the Ninja Turtles, that's Donatello, Raphael, Michelangelo, Leonardo, they're the ones that have made works that are now generally accepted to be good art, perfect art. And when we see something that's claiming to be art that doesn't fit those ideals, people often just dismiss it as junk. But the thing that we need to remember is this, that even the greats at some time were the trailblazers, and their art was the one that didn't fit in. So that's something we need to remember, that history is very long, and not everything has been thought of as art. Even the stuff that now are the things that we hold up on a pedestal. The other big thing that stops people thinking art is our homes. Sounds a bit silly, but we really shouldn't confuse art that belongs in an art gallery with art that belongs in our house. Just because we can't picture a piece of art hanging in our lounge room doesn't mean it's not worth looking at. I don't think anyone here expects to have one of Damien Hirst's pickled animals as a coffee table, but that doesn't mean it's not art. Okay? It has a place to hang, and that's in the art gallery you're in, and we need to remember that art doesn't need to be pretty, art doesn't need to go with the couch, art can be art in a gallery. The other thing that's stopping people recognising art as being art is the media. And I guess some days there's slow news days, and the only thing to pick on is contemporary art. The media has a bit of a history of beating up contemporary art, and it's usually about the cost. I'm going to show you a few prime examples of that. This is the Daily Mirror in the UK. You can see the headline there, "What a load of rubbish." This is about Carl Andre's Equivalent 8, which is essentially a pile of bricks. The Tate Modern bought that, and there was a massive public outcry. Not usually, it did start from this article. The Daily Mirror beating it up, saying this isn't art, we shouldn't be spending money on this, public funds. caused a bit of an uproar. The next one, this one's pretty recent. This one cuts pretty close. This is about the, this is a snatch from the Courier Mail, and this is about the Newman government, who made a statement, and they said if they were in power 1 week earlier, they would have canned this particular artwork. And this is an installation by the Japanese artist Yayoi Kusama. Now, Yayoi Kusama doesn't make artworks for many places in the world, and we have a giant one. And the Newman government said, you know, 1 week earlier, we would have scrapped it to save the money. And the Courier Mail picked up on that, got on the bandwagon, and beat up the idea that art's not worth money. That's what it makes people think. The last one I'm going to show you is a classic in Australian history. I think we all know about this one. This is blue poles. The Whitlam government that paid $1.3 million for blue poles, there was a huge outcry about this work, and it came from the media. The media were saying things like, how can this artwork made by a barefoot drunk be worth $1.3 million? It's crazy. But we know now, in retrospect, that blue poles is worth about 40 million US. I've actually heard a report that it can't actually be valued anymore. It's the most astounding piece of artwork that our nation owns. So if the media didn't bias people's opinion on this, there would have been a far different opinion on it. Unfortunately, the only thing that this does is reinforce the opinion that art is a waste of time and money. And this should all be ignored, just like we ignore bad press about sport and anything that Kyle Sandilands says. So, yes, it is art, and when we forget all the baggage that's been loaded onto contemporary art, we're free to see that it's not nothing, it's not frivolous, and it's worth looking at. It's been created for us to view, and it's a worthwhile pastime. The other thing that I should mention here is the reason that artists make their work in the first place. And we call that the artist's intention. Knowing what an artist wanted to achieve with a piece of art can really alter the way that you read it. But most casual observers of art aren't reading art journals or monographs or books all the time. So we're not going to enter that into the equation today. What we're talking about here is the regular, untrained folk going into a gallery on a Saturday arvo, looking at some art, making some intelligent comments and learning a little bit about themselves. The first step is to all agree that what we're looking at, love it or hate it, is in fact art. That's the first one. That's yes, it is art. The other one is you need to ask questions to get answers. This sounds really simplistic as well. As a viewer of an artwork, you'll always have questions. And that's because you're not the person who made it. They're the things, and the questions that you come up with, they're the things that you want to ask the artist if they were standing in the gallery right next to you. There's two types of questions that we can ask about an artwork. The first type are questions of logistics. And those questions are things like, how did they make that? I wonder how they got that in here. What sort of canvas have they used? How did they stretch a canvas that big? They're all questions of logistics, how something gets produced. The other sort of questions that we need to think about are critical questions. And they're questions like, why is it so big? Why is it so red? Why is it so shiny? Why did they make it from this particular material and not another? Why does it make me feel so sad? They're critical questions. More often than not, the questions of logistics don't really get us anywhere. It's the critical questions that we really need to focus on. Usually these questions, the critical questions, start as minor, obvious observations about an artwork, and they're quickly dismissed as being silly or unimportant, and we all jump to the grand question of, what does it all mean? But the truth is, we answer the question of what an artwork could mean by working through all of the little observations. I do find it funny that people get annoyed when they don't totally understand the whole meaning and purpose of a painting in a single casual viewing. They rock up at a gallery, they look at it and say, I don't get it, this is rubbish, without any reading or prior knowledge or actually any work to try and get the meaning out of it. Artists are very clever people, but we're not miracle workers. I'm a little off point. So back to my point. It's important to stick to the first question you stumble on. If it's the first thing you notice about an artwork, it's probably going to be the thing that's most important to you. And it'll probably enlighten you the most when you work through it. If you notice that the artwork is massive, think about why it is so big. What's the purpose of it being so big? If you notice that the sculpture is shiny, the question is, why did the artist want to reflect the viewer? If you noticed the boobs first, high five, dude. But who answers these questions for you? And the question is, you do. And this sounds a bit strange, but you answer the obvious questions with obvious answers. You'll either work out something about the purpose of the artwork, or it'll lead you to a new question to answer. Eventually, you'll come to some sort of a conclusion, or at least some sort of a statement about the work, or even just a clearer picture of how the artwork makes you feel. In a moment, I'll go through a few examples to hopefully make this all a little clearer. But before I do, I need to say that not everyone will come to the same conclusion about an artwork. We don't need to agree on art. In fact, the best part of viewing art is the discussions that it builds with other people. It's a very social thing. All the questions and answers and all the dialogue that gets created from viewing art is the most valuable thing. And like I mentioned before, your perception of the work may not match with the artist's intention of the work either. But then again, that's okay too. Okay? They don't have to match. Art's pretty cool that way. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to look through some examples of art, and we're going to put these two guidelines into practice. The artworks that I'm going to show you are artworks that have put a lot of people off. And I'm going to show you how I go through this process myself. So we need to remember, 1, yes, it is art, and 2, you need to ask questions to get answers. The first one here it's a bit of a classic. Now, I was talking about this painting to my brother-in-law. He's an intelligent person, and he was recently in New York, and he went to MoMA, and he said he was standing in front of this painting, and, he looked at it, and he said, well, I could see the bright colours, I could see people having fun, but it didn't make me happy. And I said, well, why didn't it make you happy? We know all these things. When you do art in high school, bright colours is happy. Happy people makes you happy. But it doesn't always work like that. And we got to talking about this, and these are the questions that I came up with for this painting. The first question is, who does this? Really, who dances around naked in the outdoors with other naked people? Really, it's an odd thing to do. When we start thinking about this, there's a few other things that come up. When I answer that question, who does dance around naked? Well, people that know a secret together. The people dancing in this painting, they share something. But they share something that the viewer can't see. And you'll also notice that the figures in the painting aren't looking out to the viewer. They're totally absorbed in their dance. And yes, the colours are happy. That's because the people in the painting are happy. It's not necessarily about the viewer. And when you start thinking about these people that have a secret, and they're naked, and they're dancing in the outdoors, and they're not looking at the viewer, and we're looking in on it, it starts to get a bit voyeuristic, a little bit creepy. So, when I follow those guidelines, yes, it's art. I answered some questions. I said, well, who dances like this? Why aren't they looking at me? How does that make me feel? I get to the comment that this painting is a little bit voyeuristic. We're looking in on another world. This is an Australian artist. This is Patricia Piccinini. This artwork is owned by Goma in Brisbane. It's called The Stags, made in 2009. I look at this, and we'll go through the guidelines again. 1, yes, it's art. It's a bit less art than the last example. We need to drop more of those concepts that we have previously about what constitutes art. I look at that and I say, well, what am I actually looking at? I'm looking at statues of animals, but they're not statues of animals, they're statues of motorbikes or scooters. And I'm thinking, well, how do those two go together? I instantly start thinking about, well, when did I think about a vehicle having a personality? And the answer is all the time. I think everybody in here has a little personality for their car. I remember back to my little green Festiva, and it had a definite personality. It was clunky and a bit dirty, but it had its own little personality. My current car has a personality. And when I look at this artwork, I start thinking, well, this artwork has actually shown us the personality of these vehicles. So I've taken the idea that, yes, I'm looking at a piece of art, and I've answered the questions of, what is it like when a vehicle has a personality? What does it actually look like? And this artist has actually physically shown us the personality of these vehicles. Okay, something to love and hold, and they're a wild beast, something that can be tamed by man. It's a pretty amazing artwork. The other thing that we need to remember with this artwork is the question of logistics that we need to ignore. I know a lot of people, when they first look at art from this artist, start thinking, well, how did they actually make that? You know, is it fiberglass? Is it metal? Was it done by a panel beater? But all of those questions are secondary to the purpose of the artwork. And we need to remember that. So we ditch the logistics and think about just the critical things. This is an example of controversial art. The idea that what we're looking at is indeed a piece of art can be fairly difficult for some people with this. This is by Tracey Emin. It's called Everyone I've Ever Slept With, 1963 to 1995. It was made in 1995. This is in the Tate Modern. This is actually a pre-bought dome tent, and inside it is embroidered the names of every person that Tracey Emin has ever slept with. In reality, it's like a living little black book. My question for this artwork is, who does this? Who is so bold that they will put the contents of their life on display in front of everybody? Who is willing to put the name of every person they've ever slept with, you know, out for everybody to read? You know, do they care about offending all these people? And the answer is, well, really no. Tracey Emin's come to grips with the idea that she doesn't care. She's put them out, you know, you can read the names there. There's Frank Burby, Billy Childish, Robert Navikas. She puts them out there on show. And it seems like a very selfish act. And tells you a lot about the artist herself. It says that she's okay with putting that part of her life out for everybody to see. It's a very personal thing, and it makes her a very vulnerable artist. So when I look at this artwork, I start thinking, really, this is more of a self-portrait than anything else. A self-portrait doesn't necessarily have to make you think of what someone looks like. It tells you about the person themselves. And in this case, this gives us a real insight into who Tracey Emin is. Not what Tracey Emin looks like, but who she actually is. So in that way, this is an excellent self-portrait. There's lots of other questions that you could come up with this, about embroidery, internal spaces, external spaces. But it's all about the first question that you come up with and how you interpret that and how you can get to a particular understanding about the artwork. The last artwork I want to talk to you about is probably my favourite out of the four. And this is the hardest for people to work out that, yes, this is a piece of art that we're looking at. This is by Dan Flavin. It's called Diagonal of May 25th, 1963. Dan Flavin went to a hardware store. He bought a fluorescent light. He took it to the gallery. He got them to put it on the wall and plug it in. That was as far as the making went in this work. I know there's a lot of people out there that will get caught on that first guideline. Yes, it's art. A lot of people will go in and just say, are you kidding me? Did the workmen not put it on the ceiling? Did they just get the plans wrong? But the answer is no. If we understand that this is in fact a piece of art, we forget all those things. How much did it cost? Forget all those things. And we start thinking about the questions that this artwork raises. And this artwork raises some excellent questions. These are some of the things that I think of. I love this sort of work. Is this still art at night when they turn it off? Is it still an artwork? What happens when the bulb breaks? If they replace the bulb, is it still an original piece of work or is it a copy? If they change the wattage, if that's in the United States and they show it here in Australia with a different voltage, is it a different work? When you're standing in the gallery and the light's on and you're being bathed in the glow of this light, are you actually standing inside the artwork? Does the artwork end where the light ends on the wall? There's some pretty amazing questions. But all of the questions have a common theme. They're all making you think about what art is. What does an artist do? All of the questions make you think about, well, what is it to actually create a piece of art? And what is it actually like to view a piece of art? These are some pretty amazing questions and some pretty amazing thoughts when you go in and look at it. If we're instantly sidetracked with the idea that this isn't art because it's just a fluorescent bulb, you're going to miss out on all this good stuff. You're going to miss out on all the amazing things that this can teach you and all the amazing things that this can tell you about visiting art. After you look at a piece of work like Dan Flavin's and you walk into a gallery and you start seeing paintings, you start thinking things like, well, what about all the paintings that are in the storeroom? If no one's looking at them, are they still art? If an artwork's restored and they take a layer of paint off, is it still an original artwork? All these ideas, these thoughts they're massive concepts in art. And this one single fluorescent bulb can get you there. And it gets you there in 2 steps. 1, yes, it's art. And 2, I need to ask some questions to get some answers. In closing, I'd like to leave you with the message that contemporary art is a really, really important thing. And that everybody has the ability and the right to say something worthwhile about it. Especially you. Thank you.
Remember that, everybody? Yes, it is art. Thanks very much, Ken Leslie.